Hello, my name is Jimmy Paul. I studied MA in Human Geography and I graduated in 2012. I've just become the head of the Violence Reduction Unit in Scotland. That is the first unit in the UK or in the world specifically tasked with reducing violence at a time in 2004 when Glasgow was the homicide capital of Europe. Over the following 9 or 10 years it reduced homicide by 90% through taking an upstream preventative public health approach, working in partnership with organisations, finding creative new ways to do things. So in my role as head of that unit, we're looking to adapt and modernise that approach and that work to make sure we're addressing the challenges of today. There are things like social media which presents challenges, the post-pandemic challenges, loneliness, the challenges with cuts to public services and the impact that's had on the social fabric of society. So my role is to try and address some of these things at the root and to make sure that there's less violence happening across Scotland. The advice I have for those looking to come into this sector, specifically the third sector, would be to have a deep think about how you're using your spare time. Is it to volunteer and get things on your CV? Is it beyond that, really building relationships with people, with key people in these organisations? Do you have a specific skill that you've learned that might work, making you a trustee or a board member of an organisation? So you're getting early experience of what governance means and you're working alongside those in these sectors. What are the things that can set you apart from other applicants when it comes to applying for these types of jobs? And how can you say with real confidence that you care, you are passionate and you've demonstrated that in your early career? So those are some things that I would suggest. I grew up in East London, in a place and a time before it was gentrified, and I grew up in harsh poverty in East London at a time when my parents weren't able to really look after me from the age of 11. My dad ended up going into prison for attempted murder. My mum was unable to look after us for her mental health, and me and some of my siblings went into the care system on my 11th birthday. And I didn't have the best experience in care. I had lots of different foster carers, lots of different social workers, was moved around a lot and was certainly made to feel different from my long-term foster carers than I was from their own children, for example, or from many of my peers. But I always knew that education was a route out, and I was lucky enough to have some really fantastic teachers that helped me when times got really tough. There was a time when I moved from foster care to residential care about 6 months before I was due to come to Edinburgh for university. I had to pass my final exams to make sure I made it into Edinburgh. And teachers knew that it was a tough time for me, and people said to me, the teachers said, would you like us to cook you a hot meal tonight and you can come over and eat with us, because we know that the unit you stays in doesn't have the best kitchen. So there were times when I had dinners with teachers. Others said, what matters to you? Asking that really broad question. And when I thought about it, it was the fact that the washing machine and tumble dryer were really poor in the residential unit. So I would bring clothes in to my head of year on a Monday and she would wash and iron them for me and bring them back to me on a Tuesday so that I could focus fully on my studies. The reason I share this is because I always knew that education would be a route out of that life, and I just felt if I were able to get to university, at a good university, and study what I wanted and cared about, it would set me up for life, and it certainly did. But I want to highlight the impact of good people along the way, good teachers who just went above and beyond when they didn't have to. And to be able to come and study at Edinburgh was a real outcome as a result of the kindness of those people. So I also say this because I know there will be some people at Edinburgh University and other universities who have had backgrounds that maybe aren't typical, and it's important to know that it is absolutely possible for you to succeed. You might have to try a bit harder than your peers. Universities absolutely should give you extra support, and you should demand that if they're not giving that to you already through their widening participation teams. But also to know that you can leverage that and let that become a strength, not a weakness. I found geography the most interesting topic at school. I found also I had the nicest teachers for geography, but I also found it really challenging. It was the one that I didn't always get the higher grades in, and I quite like to challenge. So for me it was a no-brainer to study that at university. I really like how it balances the human element and the environmental element and the injustices that come from both of those things and how they interrelate. But also I really enjoyed the ability to understand a bit more about climate change and its impact on people, which is such a pertinent issue. My dissertation was on how people use nightclub spaces. So if you think about human geography, it is about people and space, and this was about how people use nightclub spaces. And it was obviously participant observation, so I had to go out and watch, of course, and see what happened. But importantly, I spent time observing these things, and some really important things happened. I saw a fight, I saw the geography of dance spaces emerge, so lots of kind of girls dancing in circles, and what happens with the men and what happens with masculinity and affection in that space. So there was lots that came up in my dissertation around how kind of primal dance spaces could become, and how that was acceptable, say, in a nightclub, but not somewhere else. So it was a really interesting dissertation, afforded to me through a degree, and a fantastic dissertation supervisor who was really helpful and incredible, and someone who I still speak to this day. But it allowed me to explore a topic that I cared quite deeply about, and managed to get a first in that, which was fantastic, which secured my 2-1 overall. So I think it's really important, you know, I'm telling you about my dissertation with a smile on my face because I really enjoyed doing it. It was interesting to bring in that theory, but to make it real for today, at a time when you look at the nightclub economy, and there's a significant amount of money being spent in that, a significant amount of kind of how people's behaviours are accepted and identities are formed. So it was lovely to do something that felt quite relevant and important for today, and to have that support to be able to do so.